Restore those tools to the NSA and to our entire surveillance and law enforcement community. We need a president who's going to understand what actionable intelligence looks like and act on it. And we need a president and a cabinet who understands that the first and most important priority of the President of the United States is to protect the safety and security of Americans. As someone who has done it, I will make sure it gets done again.
Thank you. Governor Kasich. One of the killers in San Bernardino was an American who was not on anyone's watch list. How are you going to find that radicalized person and stop another such attack?
Well, first of all, Wolf, I said last February that we needed to have people on the ground, troops on the ground, in a coalition similar to what we had in the first Gulf War. I remember when the Egyptian ambassador to the United States stood in the Rose Garden and pledged Arab commitment to removing Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. Before we came out here tonight, I am told the Saudis have organized 34 countries who want to join in the battle against terrorism. First and foremost, we need to go and destroy ISIS. And we need to do this with our Arab friends and our friends in Europe. And when I see they have a climate conference over in Paris, they should have been talking about destroying ISIS because they are involved in virtually every country across this world. Now, you destroy ISIS in a coalition, you get joint intelligence with our European friends, and then here at home, there are things called the Joint Terrorism Task Force, headed by the FBI and made up of local law enforcement, including state police. They need the tools, and the tools involve encryption, where we cannot hear what they're even planning. And when we see red flags, a father, a mother, a neighbor who says we got a problem here, then we have to give law enforcement the ability to listen so they can disrupt these terrorist attacks before they occur. We can do this, but we got to get moving. Pay me now or pay me a lot more later.
Thank you.
This is the direction we need to go.
Thank you. Dana Bash, you have the next question.
A crucial question is how to balance surveillance with privacy and keeping Americans safe. Senator Cruz, you voted for a bill that President Obama signed into law just this past June that made it harder for the government to access Americans' phone records. In light of the San Bernardino attack, was your vote a mistake?
Well, Dana, the premise of your question is not accurate. I'm very proud to have joined with conservatives in both the Senate and the House to reform how we target bad guys. And what the USA Freedom Act did is it did two things. Number one, it ended the federal government's bulk collection of phone metadata of millions of law-abiding citizens. But number two, and the second half of it that is critical, it strengthened the tools of national security and law enforcement to go after terrorists. It gave us greater tools, and we are seeing those tools work right now in San Bernardino. And in particular, what it did is the prior program only covered a relatively narrow slice of phone calls. When you had a terrorist, you could only search a relatively narrow slice of numbers, primarily landlines. The USA Freedom Act expands that, so now we have cell phones, now we have internet phones, now we have the phones the terrorists are likely to use, and the focus of law enforcement is on targeting the bad guys. You know what the Obama administration keeps getting wrong is whenever anything bad happens, they focus on law-abiding citizens instead of focusing on the bad guys. We need to focus on radical Islamic terrorists, and we need to stop them before they carry out acts of terror.
Thank you. Senator Rubio, Senator Cruz is right. There was bipartisan support for that, but you voted against it. So is Senator Cruz wrong?
He is, and so are those that voted for it. There were some that voted for it because they wanted to keep it alive, and they were afraid the whole program would expire. Here's the world we live in. This is a radical jihadist group that is increasingly sophisticated in its ability, for example, to radicalize American citizens, in its ability to exploit loopholes in our legal immigration system, in its ability to capture and hold territory in the Middle East, as I outlined earlier, in multiple countries. This is not just the most capable, it is the most sophisticated terror threat we have ever faced. We are now at a time where we need more tools, not less tools. And that tool we lost, the metadata program, was a valuable tool that we no longer have at our disposal.
Senator Cruz?
Well, I would note that Marco knows what he's saying isn't true. Mark Levin wrote a column last week that says that the attack ads his super PAC is running that are saying the same thing, that they are knowingly false, and they are in fact Alinsky-like attacks like Barack Obama. And the reason is simple. What he knows is that the old program covered 20 to 30% of phone numbers to search for terrorists. The new program covers nearly 100%. That gives us greater ability to stop acts of terrorism, and he knows that that's the case.
Dana, may I interject?
Senator,
Let me be very
please
careful
respond.
on answering this, because I don't think national television in front of 15 million people is the place to discuss classified information. So let me just be very clear. There is nothing that we are allowed to do under this bill that we could not do before. This bill did, however, take away a valuable tool that allowed the National Security Agency and other intelligence agencies to quickly and rapidly access phone records and match them up with other phone records to see who terrorists have been calling. Because I promise you, the next time there is an attack on this country, the first thing people are going to want to know is, why didn't we know about it and why didn't we stop it? And the answer better not be because we didn't have access to records or information that would have allowed us to identify these killers before they attacked.
Senator Paul, I know this has been a very big issue for you. You hear many of your colleagues are calling for increased surveillance by law enforcement. You call that hogwash. Why is that hogwash?
You know, I think Marco gets it completely wrong. We are not any safer through the bulk collection of all Americans' records. In fact, I think we're less safe. We get so distracted by all of the information, we're not spending enough time getting specific information on terrorists. The other thing is the one thing that might have stopped Senator Bernardino, that might have stopped 9/11, would have been stricter controls on those who came here. And Marco has opposed at every point increased security, border security for those who come to our country. On his Gang of Eight bill, he would have liberalized immigration, but he did not, and he steadfastly opposed any new border security requirements for refugees or students. Last week, I introduced another bill saying we need more security, we need more scrutiny. Once again, Marco opposed this. So Marco can't have it both ways. He thinks he wants to be this, oh, I'm great and strong on national defense, but he's the weakest of all the candidates on immigration. He is the one for an open border that is leaving us defenseless. If we want to defend the country, we have to defend against who's are coming in. And Marco has more of an allegiance to Chuck Schumer and to the liberals than he does to conservative policy.
I want to thank Rand for another 30 seconds because, number one, what he's pointing to is a bill last week, an amendment he voted for that only 10 people voted for. You know why? Because it's not focused on terrorists. It would have banned anyone from coming here. Someone from Taiwan would not have been able to come here as a tourist. Number two, this program, this metadata program, is actually more strict than what a regular law enforcement agency has now. If a regular law enforcement agency wants your phone records, all they have to do is issue a subpoena. But now the intelligence agency is not able to quickly gather records and look at them to see who these terrorists are calling. And the terrorist that attacked us in San Bernardino was an American citizen, born and raised in this country. And I bet you we wish we would have had access to 5 years of his records so we could see who he was working with before they carried out another attack.
Governor Christie, you have heard... Governor Christie, I'll come to you in a minute. Go ahead, Senator Paul.
Mentioned in the question. Can I respond?
Go ahead, please.
Marco still misunderstands the immigration issue. What I put forward was an amendment that would have temporarily halted immigration from high-risk terrorist countries, but it would have started it up, but I want them to go through global entry, which is a program where we do background checks. The thing is that every terrorist attack we've had since 9/11 has been legal immigration. Marco wants to expand that. I want more rules, more scrutiny, and to defend the country, you have to defend the border.
Senator, we're going to talk about immigration in a while. But Governor Christie,
Then I get
just
another 30
listening
seconds?
to
He
this,
mentioned me
listening to
again.
this, you heard Senator Paul, Senator Cruz talk about how important it is to protect Americans' privacy, even in a time of grave danger. Why? What's wrong with that?
Listen, I want to talk to the audience at home for a second. If your eyes are glazed over like mine, this is what it's like to be on the floor of the United States Senate. I mean, endless debates about how many angels on the head of a pin from people who've never had to make a consequential decision in an executive position. The fact is, for 7 years, I had to make these decisions after 9/11. Make a decision about how to proceed forward with an investigation or how to pull back, whether to use certain actionable intelligence or whether not to. And yet they continue to debate about this bill and in the subcommittee and what. Nobody in America cares about that. What they care about is, are we going to have a president who actually knows what they're doing to make these decisions? And for the 7 years afterwards, New Jersey was threatened like no other region in this country. And what we did was we took actions within the Constitution to make sure that law enforcement had all the information they needed. We prosecuted 2 of the biggest terrorism cases in the world and stopped Fort Dix from being attacked by 6 American radicalized Muslims from a mosque in New Jersey because we worked with the Muslim American community to get intelligence, and we used the Patriot Act to get other intelligence to make sure we did those cases. This is the difference between actually having been a federal prosecutor, actually doing something, and just spending your life as one of 100 debating it. Let's talk about how we do this, not about which bill each one of these guys likes more. The American people don't care about that.
Thank you. Dr. Carson, you're in favor of monitoring mosques and schools where there is anti-American sentiment. What do you consider anti-American?
Well, first of all, let me just complain a little bit. This is the first time I've spoken, and several people have had multiple questions, so please try to pay attention to that. Now, as far as monitoring is concerned, what my point is, we need to make sure that any place, I don't care whether it's a mosque, a school, a supermarket, a theater, it doesn't matter. If there are a lot of people getting there, engaging in radicalizing activities, then we need to be suspicious of it. We have to get rid of all this PC stuff. And people are worried about somebody's going to say that I'm Islamophobic or what have you. This is craziness because we are at war. That's why I asked Congress, go ahead and declare the war. We need to be on a war footing. We need to understand that our nation is in grave danger. What the Muslim Brotherhood said in the explanatory memorandum that was discovered during the Holy Land Foundation trial is that they will take advantage of our PC attitude to get us. And we have to be better than this. We have to be smarter than they are.
Dr. Carson, who was right in that little debate we just heard between Senator Rubio and Senator Paul?
I think you have to ask them about that. I don't want to get in between them. Let them fight.
Wolf,
Hold on one second. We have a lot more to come, and everybody's going to have their full opportunities. Governor Bush, 6 days after 9/11, your brother visited a mosque and said, quote, "Islam is peace." The conversation tonight is about banning Muslims and surveillance of mosques. Are President Bush's words still relevant in today's Republican Party?
They are relevant if we want to destroy ISIS, if we want to destroy radical Islamic terrorism. We can't disassociate ourselves from peace-loving Muslims. If we expect to do this on our own, we will fail. But if we do it in unison with people who also are at risk and threatened by Islamic radical terrorism, we'll be far more successful. Look, the FBI has the tools necessary to monitor un-American activities in our country. It goes on. We shouldn't even be talking about it, to be honest with you, out in the public. Of course they have those capabilities, and we should make sure that we give the FBI, the NSA, our intelligence communities, all the resources they need to keep us safe. But the main thing we should be focused on is a strategy to destroy ISIS. And I laid out a plan at the Reagan Library before the tragedy of Paris and before San Bernardino to do just that. It requires leadership. It's not filing an amendment and calling it success. It is developing a strategy, leading the world, funding it to make sure that we have a military that's second to none, and doing the job, and making sure that we destroy ISIS there. That's how you keep America safe.
Ms. Fiorino, as you pointed out, you were a CEO in Silicon Valley on 9/11. Companies there, they say they won't help the FBI now crack encrypted communications from ISIS. Should they be forced to?
Listening to this conversation, let me just say, we have a lot of argument about laws, but none of it solves the problem. Let's examine what happened. Why did we miss the Tsarnaev brothers? Why did we miss the San Bernardino couple? It wasn't because we had stopped collecting metadata. It was because I think, as someone who comes from the technology world, we were using the wrong algorithms. This is a place where the private sector could be helpful because the government is woefully behind the technology curve. But secondly, The bureaucratic processes that have been in place since 9/11 are woefully inadequate as well. What do we now know? That DHS vets people by going into databases of known or suspected terrorists. And yet we also know that ISIS is recruiting people who are not in those databases. So of course we're going to miss them. And then we now learn that DHS says, no, we can't check their social media. For heaven's sakes, every parent in America is checking social media, and every employer is as well, but our government can't do it. The bureaucratic procedures are so far behind. Our government has become incompetent.